Hello, and welcome to today's talk about Mikhail Gorbachev,
Welcome back to the
which
Mikhail
also,
Gorbachev Live 24-hour stream where we talk about nothing but Mikhail Gorbachev.
yep, occasionally we throw in other trivia about the former Soviet Union, but it's mostly about him.
Webcomics, never heard of them. This is the Michael Gorbachev hour.
Michael Gorbachev is someone else.
That's close enough. It's the
Michael
it's the
Gorbachev
Gorbachev
is his
power hour.
cousin.
The Gorbachev in specific doesn't matter. It just has to be about a Gorbachev.
Oh, well, it's okay. If we legally change our surnames to Gorbachev, then we can talk about ourselves and our work. That's obviously the simplest solution here. What am I talking about? I don't know. Hello. We're doing comic stuff today,
Hello, everyone.
as
It's
usual.
been a couple weeks since we did comic stuff because it just did not line up correctly with stuff live. But we are now sketching the next batch of pages. Usually I'd have
Yeah.
things
So
more well prepared, but I didn't have time. So you'll see me also doing speech balloons and stuff.
this is page
31, I
31, I
believe.
believe, of chapter 2. We've got yeah, but Alex has gone to see Max again and is trying to convince them to be helpful and do cool hero stuff with them. And
What's the current page on the website?
on the website, well, we just uploaded a two-part, well, a double upload, because it was the slow sort of dramatic build to this big magical thing going on. That was page 27, so this is about 4 pages ahead. So this is, we've seen the aftermath of whatever weird magic is going on. You can probably guess, as an astute reader, that it's something to do with time magic.
All of
Because
our readers are incredibly fucking smart and don't need us to tell them what is happening.
I mean, I like to think so. I mean, it's very. There's a whole page of Max using similar magic on a much smaller scale that we've already seen by this point. So
We're so
that and the
good
fact
at
that everything's
comics.
blue and you're using a much bigger version of that same sound effect, I feel like it's pretty obvious that some sort of time magic has just happened.
We're
And
so good at foreshadowing.
I mean, I like to think I'm good at foreshadowing. So yeah, Alex has gone to Max's now intact again shop. It's been a while since I've actually looked at the script for these pages. Yeah.
It's been a time.
Yeah, I'm not going to go on a massive tangent about how I'm way ahead in terms of writing, because we talk about this every time. I still haven't finished writing chapter 2, but I'm getting there. It's been at least on the writing side of things, it's been a bit of a slow couple of weeks. I've been struggling to hit that groove again.
It happens.
I find that creatively, I'm either writing loads and loads, and I'm like really in the zone and know exactly how I want to write it and what I want to write, or I'm just struggling to get even something coherent down on a page, and it kind of sucks. Okay, so point page 50, was it 5? The one that I literally rewrote earlier when we were on call before the stream. Yeah, page 55. I'd taken a bit of a break from writing. I'd gone back to it, and a few days ago, I'd sat down and went, right, okay, I know this isn't going to be good because my head's not in the right place, but I'm going to try and do something. And it didn't come out very well, but it was still progress. I knew I was going to go back and rewrite it. I literally did that rewriting earlier today, and it's much better. So, the writing is still going ahead.
we're not. Production isn't stopping anytime soon. Basically.
Oh yeah. I mean, I always have these sort of. I think a lot of people have sort of creative struggles where they feel like their creative juices have just kind of run dry, and you're really just beating your head against whatever it is you're trying to make.
Yeah. Like,
Oh,
usually,
maybe
what
that's
I
just me. I
do
don't know.
when
But
that sort of stuff happens is I just do something else.
oh yeah, I mean,
But
there's a reason why I've been working a lot on my tabletop game projects and stuff recently, rather than the comic, because I just wasn't making any headway with the comic and needed to take a break and do something else. Because yeah, I make board games and stuff as well. I literally ended
what
up
is
kind
the status on your current board games? Because
what's
I know,
the
because I know you got like one that's basically finished and you just need art.
oh yeah, so there's one that the first one I kind of remade from something I came up with at high school, which is a sort of very wacky race to the finish, but with lots of weird stuff you can do to screw over your other players kind of game. I made that one a few years ago with some help from Marielle, or Charburst as she's known. She does the colouring for the covers for the comic, because we still work together from time to time. But that is a very big and complicated game that I have a copy of, but was never entirely finished. But then I started thinking about making some other board games, and I'm on my, I guess, third one, because my second one was Everybody Loves Cthulhu,
Right.
which is finished. That's a social deduction game where you play as cultists trying to summon Cthulhu, and the traitors are the heroes trying to stop you, who are secretly sabotaging the cult's rituals. And as far as I can tell from everyone that I've played it with and play tested it with over the years, it's a lot of fun. But the current one I'm doing, art that I'm still getting the artwork done for, is I guess a sort of quick fire 5-minute game where you just kind of I'm trying to think of how best to describe. I'm not very good at pitching my own stuff, am I? It's a medieval fantasy, no holds barred brawl where you're trying to kill each other using poison, magic, or weapons, and you sort of have to bluff about what defenses you've got and whether you can actively knock out your opponents.
Delightful.
It's a relatively simple game to pick up, and it's basically just like a deck of cards. You've got the advisor cards as well, which are like give you special powers. But it's basically just all in a single box of cards that you can just kind of pull out and play. And I'm currently getting the artwork done for that, and it's coming along very nicely.
Board games are
I've also got a couple of other.
like a single
What was that, sorry?
person endeavor. Like, it's cool that you can just make a board game, right? It's kind of like comics in that way.
I mean, look, case in point, I'm already. Because the Zugzwang, the fantasy dueling board, well, not board game, but tabletop game, mechanically it's finished. Like, I've already play tested it a lot, and it just needs a bit of polish. Hence why I'm working with an artist to get the artwork finished. But in terms of the game mechanics itself, as long as, because I'm good enough at the design side of things that I can whip up placeholder assets and make it look kind of nice without needing to do the artwork itself.
Right.
I can just get like free. There's like websites out there that just are full of like free assets for anyone to use in their creative things. You see it a lot on like low budget indie games or prototypes for things, because pretty much every like prototype game I've seen always uses the same website I do. But it means that the games that I make have a very clear kind of timeline in terms of how I make them. I spend a good how long it takes to play test and refine it depends on how complicated the game is.
Right.
Like Everybody Loves Cthulhu took me about 2 years to make, and I was playtesting it and refining it for quite a while. Zugzwang took me like a few months to flesh out and polish up mechanically. It's a much simpler game, but it means that once I've finished like mechanically figuring out how a game works, and it just needs the artwork and the polish to get it finished and looking nice. By that point, I've already moved on to designing and playtesting a whole other game.
Because it's interesting, like, in comparison to, like, video games. Because with video games, and I think we talked about this the last stream we did, which was a while ago, but video games you need to, like, have, like, people on music and people on programming and people on a lot of things.
Oh, yeah. And I think something as well that is a little different with something like... Because with a board game, no matter how complicated it is, all the assets and all the things that the players interact with are all static.
Yeah.
Right? There's no... So, once you've got the mechanics sorted, the artwork is a relatively separate thing you can do after the fact. Whereas if you're making a video game where everything's interactive and dynamic, there's a lot of like art or animation that you can't really... You have to kind of develop in tandem with the game. You can't just kind of drop them in after the fact.
Like, there's only so much...
Developing...
With video games, there's only so far, placeholders will get you, because you need to, like, physically see things. So you can make, like...
Yeah.
You can make art that's less refined, but you still need to have, like, some kind of art.
Yeah, and it's... The whole creative process, or all the different elements of it, are a lot more enmeshed together than for a lot of other things. I mean, like one of the reasons why...
games are just vibes, basically.
But you see it with... It's a similar kind of thing with like visual effects in movies these days. Because a lot of people like complain about CGI being bad now, which is broadly true, but it's that way for specific reasons. And the main reason is that modern movies have entire studios doing CGI completely independently of the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
They'll film all their stuff, they'll do all the set design, all the choreography and all that, and get all the actors in and film all the scenes. And then they'll just hand a hard drive over with all of their stuff to a completely separate studio, pay them a bunch of money and go, right, do all these things, do all this CGI for us. And it's completely separated from the rest of the creative process, which can lead to some very jarring or not very nuanced or accurate CGI. Whereas if you involve people doing the visual effects with planning the shots and figuring out how everything's going to be lit or filmed, it makes it a lot easier to do decent CGI in a way that will still hold up.
Yeah.
Later on. It's one of the reasons why Jurassic Park is hailed as being a film that still holds up really, really well now, even though it's like, almost 30 years old at this point? I forget exactly when it came out. It was like early 90s.
Did it come out before or after Jaws?
After, I think. I'm pretty sure Jaws was late 80s? Or...
No, Jaws was...
When was Jaws? Jaws has been around for a while.
Wait. No,
75.
Like, Jaws has been around for a while.
Yeah, I was like, Jaws is way older than 90s. I don't know. I was like, Jaws is at least in the 80s. It was in the 70s. Oh, right. To be fair, I think part of the reason why I thought Jaws was in the 80s rather than the 70s is because I knew it was based on a novel, and the novel came out in the mid-70s. It turns out Jaws came out literally like a year after the novel was published.
Wait,
So it was actually quite
I think I know why I'm confused.
right.
It's because Jaws came out on the same day I was born, but not the same year.
Right.
So it just
I
meshed together in my mind.
the main reason I know Jaws was originally a novel is because the author of the novel spent basically his entire life after it got published campaigning for like shark, not rights, but you know, like awareness of what sharks are actually like, because he realized how damaging his shark conservation, that's the word I'm looking for.
Shark
He
rights are
basically
also pretty
campaigned
good.
hard for like shark conservation and protection, because turns out sharks generally aren't that nasty.
Yeah.
And he regretted how damaging, because people generally weren't really afraid of sharks that much before Jaws. Because it turns out sharks aren't, you know, everywhere in the entire ocean, and certainly not along coastlines where we normally are. Most people don't encounter sharks in their everyday life, so most people weren't really bothered by them or afraid of the idea of them. And then Jaws came out and absolutely terrified everyone. But yeah, no, Jurassic Park came out quite a way after Jaws.
Yeah, I think it came out
Like the reason why it holds up so well.
around the time. It came out like when we were born. Like that's it came out in the 90s, obviously, but like close to either. We were born in the mid 90s, right?
Yeah.
So I think it did come out like around that time.
Oh, 93. Okay, so yeah, it's
See, it was
yeah,
perfectly
so
correct.
it is 30 years old now. Then the
So are we.
I was gonna say I know that was based on a novel as well, because I haven't really read any of Michael Crichton's books, but I know he's Spielberg's quite a big fan of him, I believe, because he wrote Jurassic Park. He wrote he wrote The Great Train Robbery as well. I was gonna say that's a quite a well known story, even if the novel isn't one that a lot of people will have read. Did he not do? Oh, I'm misremembering some of the things that he made. He's quite a well-known sci-fi and literary author. But yeah, no, Jurassic Park. The whole reason why Jurassic Park holds up well is because it was the first time computers were really capable of doing complex CGI, but it was still expensive and time-consuming enough that where they used the CGI in the movie, they planned meticulously around it and made sure to really take the time to incorporate CGI into the scenes in a way that they knew would be worth the effort.
And I feel like it was
You
also
know,
like kind of a different time all around.
oh yeah.
Just
Whereas
less
now,
people
you know, you have entire
working.
studio because
Yeah.
oh,
Oh
were you
yeah,
saying
yeah.
something there?
I'm saying like you had less people in general working on a single movie.
Yeah, I think part of the shift is also due to the fact that the limitations these days are less about computing power and more about creative limitations.
Yeah.
So the industry, whether this is a good approach or not, isn't really the point, has shifted away from. Well, they've shifted towards just throwing more creative people at the problem, because the computers aren't really the issue. It's the creativity and the technical skill of the people working on them. So the industry is just like, oh, just throw more people at it. Just get a bigger studio with more VFX artists.
I Keep talking, but
And
I need to tape my finger because I'm having problems with the fucking. I'm moving away from my microphone, but you know the spot on your finger where pencil rests.
yeah,
You know,
oh,
I have like a significant callus on that finger. Every once in a
oh,
while, I guess the callus softens or something because it's like also on the nail, so it's not like as calloused as something on like a more or less a more even surface to say. So every once in a while, it starts hurting like a bitch, and I have to tape
yeah,
it up with sports tape.
oh,
And now I can't find the sports tape. My office right now is like such a disaster. I have like magic cards and Tamagotchi and little trinkets all over the place. And all my books are out of order. Ah, here's the tape. Okay, continue.
um, I was just saying about how the trend of the VFX industry these days is just to keep throwing people at the problem and keep throwing money at the problem because they tend to think, oh well, the computers aren't the problem, therefore you just need to throw enough people at it and it's fine, right?
I feel like one of the problems with big movies nowadays is also just you have the too many cooks problem, where there's
Yeah.
just too many parties invested in making the movie, and it ends up as kind of a mess.
Mm. I think it's also the there's also an element of just overworking the people involved because you can't
Yeah,
really overwork a computer. It just takes it longer to do the thing that you're asking it to do. You can't just yell at it and get it. No, we need to get it done today. The computer will just work through it as best as it can until it's done. But people, uh, I mean, they shouldn't be treated like you can just push them to work faster and faster and faster with no consequence. But that's how, like, VFX artists are generally. I don't want to say treated like dirt because I'm not a
they kind
VFX
of
artist. I
are.
can't speak for them, but from what I've seen, the trend is definitely them being very overworked, and it's not great for them.
That's a problem with like basically every creative
Hmm.
position. Well, that's why the strike is happening, right? Because the situation is just so bad
Yeah, I mean,
that
it's not
basically
for.
every single, except for maybe the actors in big movies, because they have like the star power to
Yeah,
demand better conditions. It is
yeah.
basically like
I
you're a creative, so fuck you.
hmm. I do hope that VFX artists can unionize at the end of all this because they currently don't have it. Like the writers do, the actors do, but the VFX people don't. All the major creative cogs in Hollywood have unions and guilds and stuff and can have the ability to negotiate better pay and conditions for themselves. And VFX artists don't, which is partly why they're so overworked because they don't really have the means to fairly negotiate.
You know, I don't even know how you like start a union.
I mean, there's
I can only imagine that there's like some Sisyphean nightmare bureaucracy bullshit that means that let's just start a union isn't as easy as it should be.
oh yeah. I mean, I'm not familiar with the United States' legal stance or requirements for forming unions, so I can't really contribute any answers to that question. But I'm aware that VFX artists are very massively overworked and not necessarily treated very fairly by the rest of Hollywood at the moment. And the current strike that's still ongoing is partly because the writers and actors are facing a. I mean, AI is certainly a big component of that, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the US. Sorry, yeah, I was like so engrossed in this conversation, I genuinely forgot we actually have viewers and other people watching. I'm like, oh yeah, there are other people to talk to besides just Ezzy. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's why people watch your streams.
yeah, I know. I just I got very engrossed in conversation as I tend to do. God, I must be insufferable around people who don't like talking as much as I do, which is most people. My friends tell me I love to talk a bit too much, which is definitely true.
It works out fine for me because then I don't have to feel emptier.
Yeah, that's true. But I can't remember what my original point was. I'm very
That
bad at
the
keeping track of my
situation is fucked
conversations as
up.
well. Oh yeah, the
We started
about the
talking
current
about
strike that's going on.
Jurassic Park, and then
The
we went on to talk about how terrible it is to be a VFX artist.
yeah, but the I'm not involved with the strike or anything, but I'm aware that AI is definitely a concern of people's because well now that AI has started, whether the AI is good at what it does or not, a lot of big companies are under the impression they can just rely on it for cheap and easy content without needing to pay writers as much or artists as much or actors as much. Whether the AI is actually good at that or is a good replacement for a human isn't even really the issue. It's the fact that these companies want to use it to replace the humans involved.
It was already like this is all like secondhand information, obviously, because
Oh yeah,
I'm
take
not
this with a
part of
huge grain
the
of salt.
I'm not part of the Hollywood entertainment industry. But did you hear about how they would like how a lot of studios are like hiring writers for just under the time that would be they're basically hiring them as contractors, not contractors, but like
Oh yeah,
freelancers, and then they just get rid of them and hire new writers on the same project, but like since they aren't hired for the same amount of time, they don't have to pay them the same benefits.
oh yeah, like writing consultant jobs and stuff,
Yeah.
or yeah, yeah. I mean that's been a problem in a lot of industries, whether it's creative or otherwise. Companies love to do that if they're able to because it means they pay people less money. They spend less money on labor, which from a company's perspective is great, but from anyone actually working for them, it's kind of crap. It kind of sucks.
That's why I've never had like any aspirations to work like a real studio artist job, because I feel like studios get away with so much shit.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not saying like obviously not every studio is like that, but usually if a studio, if a more generally, if a company can get away with doing something that saves them money, they'll do it. Generally speaking, that's kind of how companies tend to operate. Capitalism is fun.
Personally, I blame
So
Disney. This speech bubble is so awkward.
uh, I mean, I'm sorry for writing dialogue.
You should be.
Um, Also, I'm not sure I actually mentioned because I've obviously time travel logic is going on here to some degree, and the time travel logic in this chapter is a little weird, but not entirely inconsistent with itself. I hope.
It's a relatively minor case of time travel logic, at least. It
Yeah,
can't be too confusing.
I mean, I don't want to use the cop out. It's magic, but it is also done by magic rather than technology. And I think magic generally, as a plot device, has a little. There's always a little bit of wiggle room in there. If nothing else, I can always just go, oh yeah, the time travel logic depends on who's casting the spell and how they're doing it. But also, Alex doesn't know how the time travel magic works here, so he is just guessing. If the characters don't know how it works, then I don't need to come up with an explanation,
I
right?
don't think that's true. I
I mean,
don't think that will work in the long run.
I need to at least have it enough of an explanation for it that it's self-consistent and there's no like weird plot holes. But beyond that, I don't need to explain it if the characters don't know. I'll let the fans figure it out. At some point, there's going to be a Hallowind wiki where the fans have speculated like the rules of time travel magic, and they'll have come up with some really long-winded explanation that somehow manages to cover all the plot holes. I'm like, yep, that's definitely what I intended from the beginning. Oh, what was it? Oh, there's an example of something recently, and I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, where it was something quite major as well, and now it's bothering me. I can't remember what it was about how the creative people on a series, basically the writers on a series, basically didn't have a major plot point figured out ahead of time, and they left sort of clues and foreshadowed it without knowing how they were going to solve it, and basically there was like one fan theory that was just so good they were like, we can't not do this. It's brilliant. So they ended up basically using the fan theory as the official
I mean,
events that played out in the show.
sometimes fans just have better ideas.
Yeah, I certainly. I mean, there are certain things that I certainly want to foreshadow for the future of this series, and I want to, write and have play out in the story. But it's weird. I used to be when I was started writing things, for not for the first time as such, but like when I first started taking writings seriously,
Yeah.
I was a lot more stubborn about the exact events that I wanted to write in my story and how I wanted the story to play out. I had a plan in mind from the start and thought, right, well, this is exactly how the story is going to go. I'm not changing this ever. Right. Or, I was a lot more kind of obstinate about it. Whereas now, there's a lot of like big sort of set piece moments or very specific things that I'm like, I have a very clear idea of how I want it to work. But I like to think I'm a lot more flexible about the details and about the journey there than I would have been a few years ago.
I've never been too attached to basically anything I write. So I've always been very of the sense that like I'll change whatever needs to be changed. Very much the sort of person who like throws out entire chapters if I feel like it's not working with the story.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this before. I literally threw out some chapters of this whole series uh, earlier on in the writing process.
Because otherwise it would take us literally decades to finish the story.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's still going to take us a long time to do all of this, but there were entire chapters or story concepts. I was like, this would be a cool thing to do, but it doesn't really serve the story or the characters. It's just a cool thing for them to go and do. And I've got a lot of ideas on the cutting room floor like that. That's kind of, I guess that's kind of a big difference between how I like, because as a creative person who's basically writing entirely myself, with occasional input from you if you think something needs to be talked about, that I'm generally open to feedback and criticism from you, but you don't tend to. You've generally been pretty cool about whatever I've written. You've just kind of been like, "Yep, okay, that's the next thing. I'll do that."
Yeah. Basically, the only times where I've like said stuff was when I thought something could be done better.
Yeah.
So far, it has, or like when you were unsure about something, so I
Yeah. There have been a lot
came
of
up with stuff or
yeah.
suggested stuff, but I've never had like a situation where I was like, oh no, I think this is an actual bad idea.
The closest that I think we've come to having you offer me any like real pushback on anything I've written so far has been the that page where the gang are going off to find Alex after getting their job from Melvin and first setting out to find Alex and tell him that, because the one draft of the script I'd made Stella very kind of bitchy about Alex and because like this is just like right after their initial argument, right? So Stella, being quite a stubborn person, is just kind of being quite mean to Alex without him there. And then in another draft of the script, she was just generally quite nice and kind of optimistic. And you basically suggested kind of mixing the two, picking a bit of dialogue from both, because you didn't like how just crappy she was being, which is fair. Like, like after you suggested that, I like agreed, and I was like, oh, yeah.
It was mostly a case of like, oh, this feels like people aren't gonna enjoy her character as much, you know?
Yeah. But it's weird being, because like I have you to run ideas by, but largely most of my writing gets done in isolation. So I have to be. So I tend to quite critically sort of consume the media that I do. I tend to be. I'm not good at just kind of switching my brain off and just enjoying something that I read or that I watch or that I play. There's always a part of my brain that's kind of picking it apart and going, "Oh, how does this work? What does this,
That is also
how does this
I consume media.
Yeah.
But it does have the side effect that like sometimes I like after I'm done with work, I'll wanna like read something or watch something, but my brain is like not functioning enough for it.
Yeah. It's why there's like very specific kinds of things I watch if I need to kind of zone out and just chill. And I can't do that with most like TV shows or movies. That's when I tend to turn to YouTube and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
um, it's weird. I used to be quite uh, not snooty. I didn't really think Let's Plays as a form of entertainment were particularly compelling for me for quite a while. I was like, it doesn't seem that interesting. But then there were like a couple of Let's Play channels and stuff I started watching, and it's just genuinely engaging for people who are good at it.
Yeah.
And it is the sort of thing that I can generally kind of zone out to, and because it's not scripted, like carefully orchestrated content. It's just someone's sort of genuine, off the cuff kind of reactions and sort of conversation about the whatever it is they're playing.
That's why I like
It's
putting streams on while I work.
yeah,
It's not too
like
engaging that will distract me from what I'm drawing, but it is engaging enough that it keeps my brain in focus mode, and not just and I won't get distracted by something else because I need enrichment.
yeah. Like I'd say either it depends on the podcast, I suppose. But like podcasts or like streams and let's plays are like that's my go-to sort of zone out and just chill content. Anything that's got an actual like written story and something more carefully orchestrated, I'm going to be analyzing it while I play it or watch it.
That's
That's
also
just kind of
part of
how I tend
why
to
I like
consume.
watching. That's why I tend to get trapped in a TikTok death spiral, cause it's very low key content, but like there's also it's we were talking about TikTok a few streams ago, I think, and you
Yeah,
mentioned that like you can't vibe with that sort of content, but for me it's very much like it's I can go through so many things in such a small amount of time, and it's so varied that I don't really have to like think about it, and I don't need
yeah.
to like think about what I want to watch. It's very much a thing of like uh I had a thought. It's gone now. It just
Oh,
disappeared.
yeah. It'll come back if it feels like it. Yeah, thoughts come and go. But right, yeah, that's what I was going to say about when I'm consuming media that's more like that has creative intent behind it, that has like someone writing it or coming up with ideas and weaving it together into some creative work. There are definitely I don't tend to gravitate towards these sort of things, but there's always the occasional like movie or show or whatever where it becomes very apparent as you watch it that whoever's like the head writer of it is very, very precious about every idea they throw out and doesn't like being told no from a
Yeah.
creative standpoint. I'm not going to pick out any specific examples, partly because I can't think of any, and also I don't want to be unfairly negative towards things. Um, but there are always going to be these sort of TV shows and movies and stories sometimes where, yeah, like you can kind of tell that whoever was in charge of writing the thing wanted to throw in like every cool idea they had, and
I feel like that's a problem with also American comics,
mm,
where there's a known, what do you call it, phenomenon where someone gets like a job at their dream comic, like someone's, oh, now I get to write Spider-Man, now I get to write Superman or whatever, and they just start throwing out every idea they ever had for the character,
oh
and it
yeah,
just makes it like a mess.
mm. But I always kind of, I guess part of the reason why I'm so critical of my own work a lot of the time is because I don't want to be that kind of writer, but I also don't have, because I've always loved, part of the reason why my friends probably find me so insufferable to be around is because I love talking about my ideas and discussing them and getting feedback. I love having a creative back and forth as part of my sort of process. I don't like creating things in isolation and just going, right, that's all my stuff. It's all great.
Yeah.
It's finished.
I, I
I
used to
like,
I used to do that a lot, but it was mostly because I didn't have a lot of people who could give me good feedback, or that
oh yeah, like not having access to, creative, creatively fulfilling kind of feedback and criticism isn't the same as of deliberately avoiding it.
oh yeah, I've never really avoided feedback, but I've found that I've had issues finding people in the past. Now I have like you and stuff, but
Mm.
I've had issues with finding people who give good feedback on what I'm working on. Because one of the problems that I found is that people who aren't used to giving creative feedback tend to think of things very much in the sense of what I would like and not what works for like the genre
Yeah,
or the specific story.
yeah, that's a good point actually. Yeah, because the there's always a bit of a disconnect for anything creative in terms of, because there's what you think your audience or who is going to consume it. You've got what you think they want. They've got what they say that they want, and they're both independent to what people actually appreciate about the thing you make
And
at the
also,
end of
a
it.
lot of people are good at saying what's not working, but can't tell you how to make it work.
Yeah,
I think that's one thing that sets like an editor from uh just like your friend apart.
yeah,
Someone with like an editing uh state of mind and experience. Because I feel like editors get a bad rap. Because it's always like people always blame, like especially with manga. You see people blame the editors a lot for decisions in the storytelling,
mm.
and there are some and sometimes the author and the editor are at odds. But I think editors are like in their own right, they're pretty much artists, right? They're just writers that aren't actually writing. They have a
Yeah,
writer brain. But that sort of feedback from like someone with that's in that mind space is very different from the feedback of someone who's just like reading a thing.
oh yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've always tried to do, certainly, especially after I started, when I first started posting work that I did creatively, like online, and started engaging with those sort of creative communities online, something I kind of learned to do very early on was, if I'm ever giving any sort of feedback about anything or any sort of criticism, I should only ever do it if I have a decent suggestion for what to actually do about it.
Yeah.
Even if the criticism is valid, if you just go, "Oh, the this plot point sucks," if you don't have anything to back up that with, it just comes off as if you're just being overly negative for without a purpose
I
to
don't
it.
think you even need to have like a specific solution. I think it's just more understanding of why it's not working rather than
Oh
just
yeah,
like because sometimes you feel like something's not working and you don't know why. And I feel like that saying that at the same time, it's like it's not the worst feedback. It's just like I saying like, oh, I didn't like chapter 3 and I'm not sure why is still a better feedback than like, oh, I just don't like chapter 3, you know?
True. I think it's a lot about how you give that feedback as well as just the content of it. I think if it's obvious there's intent behind it more than just this sucks and I want you to feel bad about it. If there's a positive purpose to your criticism, then
Yeah.
it's good criticism.
And also it needs to be like, you also need to be aware of what the good parts of the thing is.
Oh yeah,
Because just pointing out all the flaws in it doesn't make you come off as like very knowledgeable either.
yeah. I think especially online as well, you get a lot of people. It's so easy for people who are, especially if they're like fans of something, to be very divided into this mindset of you either have to absolutely love this thing and think it's amazing, or you hate it and think it's terrible. The idea of like nuanced criticism, in certainly in fandom circles at least, is just doesn't exist online, or is very hard to come by.
Yeah. Another thing that I take issue with, specifically in fandom spaces, is the idea of like ranking stories based on how good they are, which I think is a
Mm,
terrible idea. And you shouldn't care if your favorite story is the best or whatever.
yeah.
You should like it because it's your favorite. It obviously has
Mm,
stuff that speaks to you. It doesn't need to be the best story in the universe to be important to you.
yeah.
But
There's
also
also
by that same vein, if you're disappointed in a story and it hasn't done the things you wanted it to do or something, or you felt like it's fallen off and it's not as good as it used to be, you also don't need to freak out and start talking about how trash it is now.
yeah.
I see that a lot with like specifically shonen manga,
Mm,
especially Jump, where people get very intense about like, oh, this manga's trash now, or this manga is better than the other one. And it's not good criticism. It's not good
yeah.
media analysis.
I think that ties nicely back with your earlier point about how people who don't know how to give good criticism on things will often take them just being opinionated and not liking something, or appreciating a certain taste of something as being it's bad. There's a difference between something
Yeah.
not appealing to you personally and it just being badly made. There's a big difference between those two things.
And even if something is like, if something has flaws, it doesn't immediately mean that it's not good anymore. Especially when it
Yeah.
comes to weekly manga, like
Mm.
just because a manga has the final arc or the current arc or whatever isn't as good as the initial ones that you liked more doesn't mean the entire thing is now like
Yeah.
devoid of meaning and goodness and whatever.
Mm.
I have a theory.
Mm. Do tell.
I don't have a name for the theory, but if my theory is that with this applies more specifically to shonen manga, but
Right.
because that's the sort of thing that I interact with more often. But I think that the theory goes that basically when you have serialized media, the longer it goes on for, the more likely it is for people to start treating it as if it's bad because they've spent so long being invested in it. Then once things that they were expecting to happen don't happen, or it starts, the pacing is off, or it just
Mm.
they once people don't like it as much as they used to, they start getting like personally offended that the manga isn't the way they want it to be.
Yeah.
Like,
I
the
can see
longer a
that.
manga goes on for, the
I
more likely this is to happen, basically.
hmm.
But after a
I think
certain,
is
but there's a second part to the
no.
theory, which is that like after a certain point, you get over that hump, and whether it's still ongoing or if it ended a while ago until people had time to either that it ended so now people have the ability to read it all in one chunk and have a better idea of the whole of it, or it's gone on for so long that you've just looped back into liking it a lot because you're just used to the problems it has.
Hmm. I think there's also um, for any sort of long running media, it depends on the like exact medium and sort of how the writing process behind it works. But I feel like it's difficult to be a writer on something that's been going on for years and not have your sort of writing style or the things you write shift because you're going to be influenced by how people are consuming the stuff you're writing. You're going to be influenced by the communities and conversation about the stuff you're working on, and it can end up, or you know, you just might improve or change a bit as a writer in terms of the kinds of way that you create things, and it can lead to a bit of a drift in terms of how your work ends up. It's obviously like a lot more exaggerated an effect in things like, say, I mean, The Simpsons would be a very obvious
Yeah.
example of this, where they've been through so many different writers over the length of time that The Simpsons has been around that it's basically an impossible task to write modern Simpsons episodes and entirely recapture the feel and
The
tone and style of
Simpsons
early
is
Simpsons.
basically like Ship of Theseus.
Ship of Theseus itself, yeah, I get
Yeah.
what you're going at.
Hi,
Yeah. Hello.
Jackie. Hello. We're going on our usual rambles.
Yep, the usual rambles. But yeah, no, with so because I'm assuming with most manga, the long running ones are still broadly written by the same people. I guess it depends on how, because like I imagine the popular ones probably have quite a lot of a bunch of people in the writing room rather than
No,
just
no.
being one
It's
specific
for
person.
manga is always every manga is basically one specific guy, and then
Hmm.
their
But
editors. The thing is, the editors will change over time.
yeah, I was gonna say
But
like there's not.
Japan has a very like creator rights culture going on.
Hmm.
You see it a lot also with copyright. It's Japan is in a weird situation with that stuff,
Yeah,
where they have like very strict copyright and very like a lot of emphasis on creator rights, but also fan
yeah,
works are allowed to proliferate a lot more. It's a very weird like culture mishmash of how it functions.
yeah,
But no, pretty much every manga is one guy or two guys if it's an author and an artist,
yeah.
unless someone fucking dies,
Mm,
which is what
that
happened with Berserk, which is now being written by Miura's best friend, basically, who is also a very successful manga artist. And he's basically now writing Berserk the way Miura talked about it.
right. Incidentally, now's probably an appropriate time to bring up if something horrible happens to me at any point,
Please do
you
not
have my
start talking
blessing
about
to
dying.
you have my blessing to continue this series.
There's a 100% a protocol for when Oda dies. Because One Piece has like been going on for so fucking long.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
he does, from all he does have like, because the story is basically in the final saga, and
yeah,
a saga is a collection of arcs. But it's basically like he has everything mapped out now. It's just a question of like getting there. It's
yeah.
not like it would have been even like when I started watching One Piece, literally over a decade ago. Hold on, I think I did something stupid.
Oh,
No, how long have I been on the wrong layer? Ah, whatever.
oh, oh dear.
It's just a sketch. If it wasn't a sketch, I'd be fucked. But it's fine. It just means I'll have to remove the colored outline, the colored sketch later with some image editing magic. But basically, the thing with Oda is also that he's riding by the seat of his pants kind of guy. So because he's a lot of stuff in One Piece is like foreshadowed and set in place like chapters and chapters and chapters behind. You have like a character that showed up while the manga was still in like double digits. The
Yeah.
double digit chapters that then became important literally 500 chapters later. So like, a lot of it is set up, but he also like he keeps adding stuff. That's the thing, because he keeps having like
Yeah.
cool ideas, and then it's awesome. But also it makes the manga longer and longer and longer. How did we even end up on this train of thought?
I don't know. I feel like we ask ourselves that every single stream.
We do, don't we?
But yeah. I mean, have we talked about bus factor before on stream?
Uh, about what?
Bus factor. It's a term. It's normally used in like it's an informal term normally used for like companies and stuff. But basically, bus factor is like how a person's bus factor is basically how screwed their employers are if they are just unexpectedly hit by a bus.
Oh, okay.
It's normally
That makes
used,
a lot more sense than what I was
yeah.
thinking.
It's normally like used in for like businesses when talking about like security or you know the infrastructure of how their company works. If there's like one person who's responsible for like all of the major engineering and logistics for the entire company and they haven't documented it well or trained anyone else in how they do things, their bus factor is like through the roof. Because if something happens to them, the entire company grounds to a halt. I feel like for any kind of creative work where there's like one person who's basically the sole
See, now that you're talking
writer.
about that, I think we have actually talked about this on stream.
I was going to say, I wasn't sure if we talked about it before. But basically, like,
This is all sounding very familiar.
I know I've talked about it with people before, but it's anyone's sort of bus factor for a big creative series or something is just always going to be really high. Like the amount of stuff writing to this comic series that is just either in my head or I mean I've made notes. That's reduced the bus factor for me a bit, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm not sure how you'd manage if I just up and snuffed it all of a sudden.
Well, please don't get hit by a bus.
I mean, hypothetically, if it was just a bus, or I don't know, a bus got dropped on me, that would definitely do me in. More than just a bus hitting me. But, I don't know. I was genuinely thinking the other day about... Because I'm still quite precious about my own ideas and my own work. less so than I used to be, but I still am in some ways.
Right.
And I was, what was it? Right, it was the, I don't know if you saw about this. There's a writer who, what was it he was responsible for writing? Oh yeah, it was the oh god, I'm blanking on the name. The fairy tale noir franchise.
Skull.
Was it Telltale made a game of at one point?
Skull, whatever the fuck?
Where you played as like the big bad wolf as like a noir
Oh,
detective.
Fables.
Yeah. The writer for that
The
basically
fucking kids book series with the skeleton man that I also know nothing about.
right. But there was a bit of a hubbub recently because the guy, essentially the comic book adaptations of that whole storyline and that whole world is owned by DC, I believe,
Yeah.
/ Warner Brothers. They own the comic book rights to it, and the creator of this whole franchise has basically been really struggling against a lot of renegotiations and attempts by DC to like own the full rights to it, or try and screw him out of extra royalties, or try and do stuff that he's not comfortable with it. And basically, the other day he declared that I'm not entirely sure if DC did anything specific, but this guy basically said, "Right, I'm just making it all public domain.
Nice.
DC still have the rights to the comic book versions of these characters and these stories, but everything else, the world, the characters, everything that I've worked on, it's all public domain, and anyone can do what they want with it now."
Fucking incredibly fucking based.
Because he was just sick of being screwed around by DC constantly over all this stuff, and he decided to make it all public domain. I think there's been a bit of a, obviously DC are trying to like contest this and try and like sue him over it or something. He basically did this because he knew that he didn't have the means to get into some sort of protracted legal battle with DC over the rights and the legal ramifications of having his work, because he was sick of constantly fighting them on things. But it got me thinking about, like, hypothetically, if I ever had a proper, like, anthology of just all of the world building stuff I've done for this series, I'm not sure I'd be happy putting the characters in this specific story into the public domain, but the world itself is... I'd certainly be interested to see what people did with it if I just made it free for anyone to do what they wanted with.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, making the world and everything, the backdrop to this whole thing, public domain, wouldn't do anything to the stories I want to tell. Like, I'd still be able to write my stories with these characters,
if it's in the public domain, anyone can do it, so there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah. Because literally the only reason I'm at all opposed to the idea of any of my work being public domain, mostly, is because I need compensation for the work that I do in order to live and function.
We need food.
Yeah. Like, outside of that respect, if I didn't need money in order to live and to have nice things, I would not care anywhere near as much. And I'd be like, yeah, do what you want with it. I'll make my own official stories that are, from the person who created all this, but if you guys want to do stuff with it, go for it.
My plan for when I die is to have it on my will that, like, all my stuff is now in the public domain. Good luck, fuckers.
Would you actually put the words "good luck, fuckers" in your will?
Am I allowed to?
I mean, probably.
Then
like,
yes.
I think, because I'm pretty sure I'm not entirely sure because I've never had to write my own will, but I'm not that old yet. But I believe, in terms of what you can actually put in your will, you can. There's not really any restrictions on what you put in your will. The restriction is in how that will is executed. Like, you could put in something in your will saying, I want my ex-wife to be killed if I die before her, or whatever, but, like, that doesn't mean that the people have a legal obligation to literally murder someone because you've requested it.
I want my wife
You
mummified, mummified, mummified,
mummified.
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 I want my wife mummified, and I want his boat to be sat down in front of the TV, but we have to be posed as if we're mid-argument.
Yeah. Like, you can put whatever ridiculous stuff you want in your will, but how that will is executed after you die is very much dependent on whether it's legal to do and, you know, the specific terms and lengths people will go to for executing your will. Because obviously, you know, once you're dead, you can't really stick around and argue with people about whether they're sticking to your will or not.
I've always kind of wanted to have a Viking funeral, but I don't think that's legal.
No? What, as like a...
Just like, if I die, you know, just put me on a boat, send me into the ocean, and then set fire to me.
See, I want to do that, but like the NASA equivalent of that. Stick me on a spaceship and blow it up when it's halfway to space. There's no way that could ever possibly be seen as negative or wasteful or anything.
It would also
Space Viking
just
funeral.
getting blown up. Like, just shove me full of fireworks and have at it.
Not pile fireworks and explosives on you. Shove you full of them.
After I'm dead. Specifically after I'm dead.
I think my favorite my favorite line about like what you'd want to do, what you'd want people to do with your body, is I'd like my remains to be scattered at Disneyland, but don't cremate me. That's hands down like the funniest one I think I've seen of people talking about this thing.
I said it's like
just the idea of
like
just flinging body parts around Disneyland just tickles me.
Isn't people's asses getting scattered at Disneyland like an actual problem for Disneyland?
Oh yeah, that's probably also
everyone is like trying to scatter Mima in the haunted mansion, but like after a while you're just like the haunted mansion is just like covered in a fine layer of dust from all the ashes being scattered. I think this specifically the haunted mansion, they have like staff on site specifically making sure people
to sweep up the ashes.
No, just making
to stop people scattering it in the first place. Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah, that's not what my brain meant to. Oh no, they'll let them scatter the ashes. They're just a real pain in the ass to clean up afterwards.
Obviously, it's considered like a biohazard.
I mean, I don't know about a biohazard as such, but certainly not pleasant. No, I've talked a lot about like made jokes about like silly things that would be funny to happen to me after I die. Like have a spring-loaded coffin and play Pop Goes the Weasel. Or there was a clip of someone's funeral that surfaced online. But the reason why it was being recorded and posted around was because part of their will involved a recording of them being played from inside the coffin, like during their. Oh, someone's posting something spammy in the chat.
Oh, I don't think I have a fucking. I have people moderated. I don't know if anyone who I have moderator is actually paying attention to the stream.
I don't know.
Oh, I can deal with it, I think.
They're posting some sort of
Or
random
not. I probably
promotional.
can't deal with it. Whatever.
Well, I can't. I'm just chilling. I'm not even sure I'm logged in on Twitch at the moment.
You should probably be logged in on Twitch and subscribe. What do you call it on Twitch? Follow?
Following? Subscribing? Like, I'm pretty sure I am. I'm just not logged in at the moment. Because, I'm talking live on stream. I don't really need to post stuff in the chat. I just need to be able to see it. What was I saying? Right. About joking funeral stuff. There was a guy who, part of his will involved a recording of him being played from inside his coffin. And it was basically him, making, knocking sounds and going, "Help, let me out, I'm still alive in here." That was the recording he'd provided. And, obviously everyone knew it was fake. But the guy clearly had a sense of humor about him. And I don't know, I feel like I'd certainly want something funny to be done at my funeral, but not so far over the line that it's just, horribly offensive and insensitive.
You don't want to, traumatize all of your friends and family.
I'd want to do something funny that kind of lightens the mood a little bit as much as it can at a funeral, but not be so obnoxious that people aren't able to actually grieve there. If that makes sense.
This is a little morbid. I had a terrible time at my grandpa's funeral.
Right.
As you'd expect, but also, the priest was... First of all, it was in the church by my grandma's house. And it was supposed to be a priest that my grandma knew. But the guy she wanted was not available or something. I don't know how priests work. And basically, they got the other priest, the guy was closer to death than he was to the living, basically. He was very, very old. And obviously it's a funeral, it's not a pleasant experience anyway.
Yeah.
And we're all and it's a very tiny church, it's very tiny. The room where the funeral was happening basically held 15 people, and we were all smushed together to fit in. And so we're all... First of all, it's a horrible rainy day, and it also rained later at the cemetery. We're all smushed together in the basement of this absolutely tiny, tiny church. The priest looks like he doesn't know what day it is, and everything's already going bad. And then the priest starts talking about, samosas.
Samosas?
like the pastry that's
I was
Middle Eastern. So the priest starts talking about in the Middle East, unprompted, in the middle of the funeral, while he's doing the right stuff, unprompted. He goes, in the Middle East, they've banned samosas.
What?
And at that point, my entire family, kind of remember that I have an extended...
They're the little...
Yes,
the little sort of savoury triangular pastry things, right?
Pastry things.
What?
My extended family doesn't get together very often, But we were all crammed together in this tiny church basement. And the priest goes, you know, samosas. And we all kind of raise our heads slightly. My grandma's still like crying over the coffin. And this was traumatizing at the time. But the priest just kind of goes like, in the Middle East, they've banned samosas, which I'm losing my shit. Which I don't think was ever true. He's just talking shit.
That seems...
In the Middle East, they've banned samosas, because samosas represent the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the Holy Trinity, because they have three sides. And
what?
At this point,
sorry, what?
At this point, we all like start looking at each other, and I'm sitting between my mom and my aunt, who's not related to my grandpa at all because she's an aunt from marriage from my mom's side, and she's just, my aunt and her mother came in just for moral support basically, because they're technically not on that side of the family. But I'm sandwiched between my mother and my aunt. Yeah.
Sorry. Apparently it's true. Specifically. Sorry, like, I'm gonna be badly butchering this pronunciation, but, Al-Shabaab, the extremist group controlling parts of Somalia, banned samosas in 2011 because the triangular shape could represent the Christian Holy Trinity, as well as over concerns about the possible use of rotten meat in the filling. There is a linked... Okay, it was an article in the Huffington Post several years ago.
Do you understand what you just did to my brain? I've spent, what, 14 years thinking the priest was going senile?
There's... no, like, it's... okay, according to the BBC article about it, at least, it was more motivated out of food safety concerns than anything religious. I think the religious side of things is more a rumour of the reason for that ban. But yeah, there's a BBC article from 2011 about Somali people dealing with famines and stuff, and
I'm losing my fucking mind, Steven.
Yeah, like, no, it was yeah, like, there was a huge famine there at the time, and people were making samosas out of rotten meat because they didn't have any better things available. So samosas were banned in Somalia specifically for a while.
Somalia's not even in the Middle East. I've spent 12 years thinking that the priest at my grandpa's funeral just went fucking senile before doing the funeral, and you're telling me that this is an actual thing that happened.
Yeah, like, I'm as surprised as you are. I thought, like, what? That's so weird. What the hell? That's obviously not true. Like, that's ridiculous. And then I'm just looking up, like, samosas, and there is indeed, near the bottom of its Wikipedia page, a little bit about the fact that they were banned, and it's got links to articles and stuff, like, it was reported in the news. Yeah, there was a religious extremist group who were ruling Somalia at the time, banned samosas in 2011. It was more over concerns of the widespread use of rotten meat because there were famines and shortages of good food.
I mean, to be clear,
it was rumoured that it was also partly religiously motivated.
That was still a weird fucking thing to happen.
But yeah, there you go. Apparently your priest was not full of shit. He was actually being...
Well, he's probably dead now.
Well...
Because he was very, very old.
Oh, and all this time, you thought he was lying about samosas being banned.
He was lying. I think he was just... I just thought he'd, like, didn't know what he was talking about?
I mean, based on the way you were telling the story, I thought that as well. Like, I am also surprised at the fact that Somalia did indeed ban samosas for a while. Sorry, but this has gone off on such a tangent. What the hell has happened over the last few minutes of our conversation and our lives?
I'm losing my fucking mind.
I um I genuinely my brain is,
Like,
if it's half as broken as yours,
the fact
I'm.
that it's true does not alleviate the fact that it was fucking weird.
Oh yeah, it is a really
It was a
random thing to drop into the middle of
bizarre
a
fucking
funeral.
conversation.
There you go. Don't go to Somalia and eat samosas. I'm assuming they're not still banned. This was like over 10 years ago that this happened.
God. Genuinely fucking. My mind's exploded. Like, I'm done. I feel like I'm coming out of this stream a different man.
Have I just, like, given you a way out of the Matrix or something, and you're just seeing the code for the first time?
Basically. I don't even know where we go from here.
I
Like,
mean, me neither, to be fair. That was quite a
How do you
weird.
continue a stream after this happens?
Who knew the only way to shut me up was to talk about samosas being banned in Somalia? So, comics. Comic things.
I will
Alex
say that,
does not look
like,
very impressed here.
he's not. I will say that, like, having a very traumatizing funeral for a family member, it works out very fine in the long run. Because at a certain point, you get over the trauma, and then it's just funny.
Oh, yeah. I think there's. I'm trying to remember what it was. Who created the idea of, like, the stages of grief?
I have no idea.
Because that whole thing is, like, it's one of those things, it's a really popular idea that a lot of people like to bring up, but it's not at all how people's brains work. Or at least it's not meant to be taken literally in you go through all of these steps in order. It's just like the kinds of common things that people deal with internally when grieving the loss of a loved one.
The problem with a lot of, like, pop psychology is that people take, like, stuff out of context.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up with things like, oh, the stages of grief is X, Y, and Z. And if you don't go through them, then you're not grieving correctly. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, everyone also, like, everyone deals with grief in kind of their own ways. And I think it depends on who the person was you've lost as to kind of how you process it as well.
On a
There was
comics-related note, the new format is, like, fucking with my brain so badly. Because this is, like, the selection I'm doing. This is, like, the usual panel borders. This is the safe area. And then everything else is just for the sake of trimming.
Yeah.
So, like, in theory, the only thing that will ever show on the printed comic is basically this, but I still have to draw everything else.
Yeah. You know what would be funny? If, like, even just to amuse yourself, just occasionally sneak a weird little detail in one of the panel corners that if it's going to be cut off, just hide a weird little detail in there as, like, a signature thing. No one will never know unless they watch these streams. But
I'll just have like looks like Sonic the Hedgehog. Sure. There. I think that still bleeds into the trimming area though.
yeah, it turns out
It's
there's a
more
creature
because
that
the
looks like Sonic the
website
Hedgehog that's canonically been following Alex and Max around
the
since chapter
website
2.
version is like smaller than the future proofed trim version. Because we're gonna have
Yeah,
the trim be slightly different. Which means that it'll be more zoomed in on the website, which is good. Because you wanna read things on the web better.
yeah.
While on a book, you can just spend more time looking at it. Unrelated, I there's a really annoying thing about drawing Max.
Right.
The You know how the bones in your arm work?
Yeah. I'm aware that Max's bones. Well, I get. Does Max? Have we actually decided whether Max has an internal skeleton?
Well, he probably does. He doesn't have that much exoskeleton that it would make it
Hmm.
unnecessary. But you know how the bones in your arm twist?
Yeah.
And you know how, like, Max has exoskeleton on the back of his arms?
Yeah.
Their arms. And they have two arms. So when they twist, something weird happens. And I've been mostly
Yeah.
avoiding trying to draw it.
Yeah.
It is very much a case of if I'll just draw how it looks good, but it's probably not anatomically correct. But since the anatomy is made up anyway, no one will know.
Hmm.
That's
I mean,
also I've been thinking about
to
it
be
for a
fair.
while, but
Hmm?
also it's something that also applies to tattoos.
Hmm.
If you get a tattoo on your forearm, you have to do it with the expectation that it'll look weird when you twist your arm.
Yeah.
Because I have
Something.
you know the magic tattoo I have.
Hmm.
It's very interesting to look at because when I have my arm like palm up, it's like fully on my forearm. But if I
Yeah.
twist my arm, then it's like on the side instead of being under. Bodies are weird.
Indeed, they are. Especially if it's the body of a weird fantasy person that doesn't have human anatomy. Something that just kind of occurred to me, thinking about the question of whether Max has an internal skeleton, which might actually go some way to explaining the slight weirdness about the arm twisting. What if Max's species, the Cattiids, have like sort of like what's the word? Cartilaginous, like sort of fishbone skeletons on the inside, rather than like a sort of rigid.
Honestly, sure, that works. Anything that will justify having to draw them not entirely anatomically correct on a human way.
Hmm.
If I
Which I
was a better artist, I'd probably be able to come up with something more extensive on the species. But the thing is also that I still haven't, because I said that I wanted to do like a small guide on drawing each species of the each race of the world, which I still
right,
haven't done. But it is like something that I want to get done at some point so the biology of each race is consistent.
yeah. I guess would Max be like weirdly flexible in some ways for having this sort of unusual skeleton?
Probably. I mean, it's like what people with um whatchamacallit disorder.
What, who are like double jointed and stuff?
Yeah, there was a specific cartilage.
Is it hypermobility? Hyper something
It
or other?
might be, but I'm thinking of a specific thing. Ehlers-Danlos, or something.
Oh, right, yeah.
It would basically,
Uh,
a lot of people with
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Ehlers-Danlos
Yeah.
have like hypermobility and can bend their bodies in weird ways, which is not good because it turns out bodies aren't meant to do that.
Yeah.
But I imagine if this is like how your species comes factory default, it would be a lot easier on your body.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if your arms are literally, they're able to split apart and rejoin into smaller limbs at will, and that's just kind of how your species works, it's not really going to be very straining on you, presumably.
That is a thing. That like, have you ever considered how different biologies would have like different kind of ailments and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Because like even in
I mean,
humans,
Hmm, go ahead.
depending on your genetic makeup and where your ancestors come from, you have like different propensities for different genetic diseases.
Oh,
I
yeah.
imagine that in a fantasy setting, it's like even more pronounced.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I was thinking about a while ago was like, presumably the Jinn still get diseases of some kind, or get sick, or certain like weird things happen to them. But it's going to be so divorced from anything humans have to deal with.
They get like magic congestion or something. They sneeze and just a glob of magical energy comes out of their faces.
Or like, what if like bits of their body just kind of fall off or stop working? It's like the equivalent of
That
getting
would
like a
be like
dead leg or
that
something.
would
Your
be like
essence
really
just
concerning for anyone, any other species that doesn't like
oh
know
yeah.
how they work.
But for a Aegean, like if Toby's hand just like unexpectedly dropped off because his essence like suddenly got cut off from his hand for a bit because of being congealed or whatever, he's like, oh, not that blooming thing again. I'll just pick it up and reattach my hand. Anyone who isn't a Aegean would probably be quite freaked out.
Oh, we were talking about when were we talking about this? With when we were talking about what are the salamander people called?
Erodians.
Oh yeah, we were talking about Eurodian curse words,
Right, yeah.
and
And
we
about how,
we started talking about how they might eat their skin.
oh yeah, they totally do. At this point, I was, because originally I was just wondering, do salamanders, not do they shed their skin necessarily, but like, do they eat their skin? Because that's a very common thing for animals that shed their skin to do. So, yeah, Mercury's species, not that she's appeared yet, but the Erodians are a race of people that not only shed their skin, but eat it as well. So it's not so much a curse word, but an expression in their native tongue is "go chew your own skin" as a sort of dismissive, uh, sort of annoyed retort to tell someone to go away and stop bothering you. Basically, go chew your own skin. What was it? There was another one I came up with as well, and I can't remember what it was. A little while ago. When did we? Oh yeah, we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons stuff. About the fact that Stella doesn't have her tattoo on that one page.
Shh, no one needs to know that.
Well, yeah, she's not. She's going to have the tattoo by the time that page is Have you already done that, by the way? Because I don't have the file
No, it's on my list.
for that yet.
But
Right.
because I woke up at fuck o'clock today, all I've had time to
Yeah.
do is basically what I've done on stream.
Yeah. That's fine. Oh yeah, and then the time I was looking up. I don't know if the Halloween party that I'm potentially going to is and what's the deal with that is at the moment, but yeah, I was talking to you about potentially dressing up as Ghost Rider and about how there was the Amazon like product description for that skull mask was a great gift for a friend or girlfriend that I cried laughing at because I was not expecting it at all. The idea of like giving a romantic gift to your significant other and it turns out it's a skull mask.
A
I
lot
mean, I
of
guess if they're into that
people,
sort of thing, why
a
not?
lot of people have got girlfriends nowadays.
Um, I'm just gonna search, use Discord's search feature.
Okay, I
Oh,
think
it's
that's
it's
the
way
page
further back
then.
than.
And it's been almost 2 hours.
Oh, of course it has.
I
Well,
was
you got some good sketching done on that page. It looked good.
I was thinking of getting 2 pages done on this stream, but I don't have the time to start another one. Do we have any announcements?
Um. Well, it's not really my place to say, but as he is officially giving all of his stuff to a charity,
No.
everything, and
I worked hard for the
he's
stuff.
gonna live like a hermit.
If
He's
I
gonna
live like
become
a
the new
hermit, I can't
Diogenes
update the
of
comic.
Portugal. We'll figure that out. The point is, he's giving all of his money and stuff away to charity. And no, I don't have any serious
Okay.
announcements to make. So
Thanks everyone for coming and chatting and
thanks for
hanging
stopping by.
out.
We've talked about a lot of very strange things as usual,
Remember
but hopefully
to
it's been
check out the
enjoyable.
comic and check out the Patreon in general.
Yeah, go to
Co-
Hallowind.net and read the comic. I don't know why you'd be here watching this stream if you're not already reading the comic, but go and read it if you haven't already. I promise it's good.
okay, good night
Probably.
everyone.
Good night, folks.
Peace.